Hello everybody, this is a course about Java Entreprise Edition. Some of my students at Hassan First University asked me to record a series of videos, or the videos I'm giving, the courses I'm giving at the university, to be able to memorize everything and share it with other students, by the way. The course is mainly about Java Entreprise Edition, JSP Servlets, JSF, Java Server Phase, and EGBs, and web services, and everything that is related, like APIs and frameworks and so on. So there is two parts of this course. This course is mainly about mastering web application development using Java Entreprise Edition and related frameworks. In the same time, it is a good opportunity for those who want to learn about distributed systems and distributed applications, especially with EGBs and web services. The prerequisite for this course is object-oriented programming, Java programming, and a little bit of network. The content of this course is, as I described, in JSP, then JSF, EGBs, web services, and JSP and Servlets. We're going to start with architecture of web applications to explain what is a web application based on what the students or the programmers have already as knowledge. So what is the relationship between web applications and standard applications like client-server architectures, client-server applications, and so on. We're going to see servlets, session tracking, Java server page, JSP, tags, and filters. So after this is the first part of this course. After that, we're gonna continue and see the JSF and GPA, web services, EGBs, and so on. So for this first part, we're gonna focus on web applications, developing and programming web applications using Java Entreprise Edition, which is the building block for the rest of this course and for Java Entreprise Edition in general. So when we understand what does it mean a web application using servlets and JSPs, then we can move on and see the other sections of this course. So the architecture, we are referring to a generic client-server architecture. Some of you, or most of you, must have seen something like that, like a client application, a server application, and using TCP IP protocols or other protocols, these two applications can communicate, whether using sockets or so on. So HTTP is an application layer protocol based on TCP, which means that HTTP web applications in general are just a special case of client-server applications where the client is your browser and the server is the application server. The notorious HTTP client are the browsers, websites, expirators, and indexation robots. These clients connect to and get served by the HTTP servers such as Apache, IIS, or others. That's in general. This definition is valid for not only Java Entreprise Edition but also applications using ISPX or other technologies. So as we see here at the table, there is the physical layer, networking, IP, and then the TCP. And on the top of the TCP protocol, we built HTTP for hypertext transport protocol and FTP, file transfer protocol. And in this course, we're going to be mainly using HTTP protocol. We're going to explain the HTTP methods and so on when we explain web services. At the beginning, we're going to just explain briefly and generally what is HTTP. So there is a closer look at this architecture. There is the web browser, which is talking to HTTPD daemon in the web server. So the web server is providing responses when it is getting some requests. The HTTP requests are sent to the web browser, and the web browser answers with HTTP responses. HTTP supports the transfer of hypertext markup language (HTML) documents, which may contain links to other web documents or web forms. HTTP supports all types of documents. So here is the HTTP packet, and it is containing the method, which is here get. When I get something from the web server, and it is the request URL and HTTP version. Only thing is the request line, and this is the request header, which is containing other information like encoding the language and other stuff, like the agent, which is the browser, which is sending this request to the server. After receiving this request, the server gonna answer with a HTTP response, HTTP version, and response message. There is the HTTP version and the response message number, and there is a variety of answers, like 200 mean that everything is okay. There is other ones like 500, which means that there is internal error at the server, and 500 and for 404 and so on. So, and there is also in the inside within the packet itself, there is the message body, which is an HTML message. For example, here the hello servlet as the title, and in the body there is like white. It is written in background white, and it is just the famous hello word. Mainly the Java Entreprise applications consists of collaborating components that provide a dynamic answer to the client. So there's the models, views, controllers, parameters, attributes, classes, helper classes, and a lot of other kind of components. So the programmer should know how to manage these components, how these components share the information, how to hide and secure this information, and so on. So all these things we're gonna see in this course, in this tutorial, and we're gonna learn together how to build web applications using Java Entreprise Edition. So here we have our architecture, and that's why we study Java Entreprise Edition. The main architecture is sometimes like this, but the programmer can also change the architecture a little bit to be able to adapt it to his special context. Here is the web tier, things that are executed in the browser itself. And in the web server, they're gonna contain JSTL, which you're gonna see in this course, Java Servlets, and Java Server Pages, JSP, JSF pages, and so on. Other technologies can be added to this architecture. Here in this course, we're gonna start with Java Servlets and Java Servlet Pages. JSTL as a building block, as you see here, it's based on that we build Java server faces and other frameworks if we're gonna do it. So here we're gonna start with Java Servlet and explain what is a servlet. Java Servlet technology allows to define servlet classes that will respond to HTTP requests. A servlet class extends the ability of a web server. The main job of a web server is to receive requests and reply with an answer with the HTTP response. The servlets extend this ability of the server. Servlets are classes that are loaded to the memory at the initialization, one per its life cycle. So the first time when a servlet receives a request, it's gonna be listening and gonna provide an answer, and it will be like initialized and loaded to the memory, and it's gonna start servicing the requests. Servlets receive the HTTP request and prepare the response to be sent to the client. We have the servlet container, and we're gonna program ourselves as programmer servlets, which are classes that gonna receive requests, HTTP requests, and provide HTTP responses. It is the web browser, web server, and the servlet container. and we're gonna send our request to the web server, for example Tomcat or Glassfish, JBoss or others, and the web server gonna send this request to the servlet container, and one of the servlet, according to the URL of the request we are sending, gonna provide the response. Here is our servlet. It is extending all the time from HTTP servlet, which is in turn extending the abilities of a generic servlet, which is implementing servlet, serializable, and servlet config. So when we gonna describe, for example, we're gonna create our servlet, we need to extend HTTP servlet to be able to serve the HTTP requests. So here are some methods we can use. Is init. Some methods we can override that are already on servlet, and we inherit them as we have seen here, and they are here in HTTP servlet. When we're gonna extend the HTTP servlet, we can override them or we can use them. There is the init with a config parameter called by the servlet containers to indicate that the servlet is being placed into service. So the servlet is starting servicing the requests. There is another one which is get servlet configuration. So it is returning a servlet config object which contains initialization and startup parameters for the servlet. And we're gonna see this in this course in the chapter which is called servlet initialization. And we can also get the servlet info, which says information about the servlet, such as the author, version, and copyright. And we can also override this method. There is destroy, called by the servlet container, to indicate the servlet is being taken out of the service. There is also the method service with request and response, called by the servlet container to allow the servlet to respond to a request. So this is the main job of a servlet is to receive requests and send answers, like dynamic answers based on the information sent and based on what we have in the logic of the application and the data we have. So we receive a request, we do some operation, and we send the response back to the web browser. There's also get init parameter that in the servlet config, the configuration, we can get the parameters, we get init parameter names, and get init servlet context. So we're gonna get all of this and we're gonna try them in the next chapters. Get servlet name to get the name of the servlet. Here is the HTTP servlet, which is, by the way, inheriting from the generic servlet, which is inheriting from servlet and servlet config. So there's also some specific methods that are specific to HTTP, because this is not a generic servlet, it is an HTTP servlet. There is servlet with HTTP servlet request and HTTP servlet response. They are doing the same thing, but for HTTP request and response. And there is also the servlet, which is specific, that's generic. And there is also the post and the get, which are two methods of the HTTP protocol. So the post allows the servlet to handle the post request. That's something that's going to be posted to the web server. And get is a request sent to ask for information or to get information from the servlet. So this service, for example, if we go back here and read, receives the standard HTTP request from the public service method and dispatches them to do whether do get or the post according to the type, the method sent with the HTTP request. For example, if we send something encoded in the URL, we send a parameter in the URL, it is a get request, which means that this method gonna be called here. So we're gonna see examples like that. Things will be very clear for everybody. So here we have the HTTP servlet request and response, and they are extending for servlet request for servlet response. By the way, the method request is a generic, work with other protocols as well. HTTP, which is the request may contain parameter, is an HTTP request may contain parameters, metadata, text, and files sent by the browser, and so on. We can send a request with a video, with a file, with anything we want, or just parameters like forms, name, username, password, and we click the send button to check if this login password exists, for example. That is an HTTP request. Get parameter, get with 2 parameters. So we can send parameters like that with HTTP. We can receive the parameters from the HTTP request if they are sent to the web server, which means it's sent to one of the servlets if we are using a Java Enterprise Edition application. The response is responsible, this object is responsible for sending the response to the client, the web browser. These responses may contain metadata injected by the servlet using content type, text, HTML tags, and so on, injected using getWriter, and file injected using output stream, and so on. So let's see an example. Here we're gonna see the methods that are available for us in order to manipulate the servlets. We have these methods for the request. We can get parameters. The method returns just one value associated with the given parameter. We get parameter and we give string. For example, if we sent already, the client sent a parameter name, which is Osama. So if we put here get parameter, and for the name we put a string name, the parameter that gonna be extracted is Osama. String get parameter values, which means string parameters, and we give the values if this thing we are extracting is a list of something. This method returns all the values associated with the parameter. For example, while doing a job search, you might have seen a location in a list that allows you to select multiple states, for example, or multiple regions, multiple cities. In this case, you have one location as parameter, but this parameter gonna contain many values, multiple values like Casablanca, Paris, Brussels, and so on. So all of them are in a list. So here we are providing just the name of the parameters, and we are getting a string list, which is a list of strings. And we can also get the parameter names if we don't have any idea about what are the names of the parameters already sent by the client, or there are many and we want to loop over them. We use this get parameter names, which extracts the names of the parameters sent by the client. This method is useful when you don't know the name of the parameters. You can iterate through the enumeration of strings returned by this method, and for each element you can call get parameter or get parameter values. So if you don't have any clear idea about what the user is sending you, the names, the precise names of the parameters, go ahead and get the parameter names, iterate over them, and see what the user is sending you. And for each parameter name you can call get parameter values or get parameter. So it depends on the nature of the parameter we're gonna get. For example, if the user is sending the name and the list of locations, for the name put get parameter and the string name. For the locations, get parameter values to get a list of parameters. So we're gonna see this in practice and see how we enable a servlet to analyze a request sent by the browser, by the client, and how to provide an answer. So other methods are the string get header, which means that we can get the information of the header from the header using a header name, or we can use get headers. The method returns all the values associated with the header as an enumeration of string objects. So here we're gonna get all the headers that we have available for us. Here we can get also header names and the names of the fields that are already in the header. Then we can iterate over them and use the get header or get headers. So get header, this method returns just one of the values associated with the given header. Get headers, this method returns all the values associated with the header as an enumeration of string object. So if a header name contains more than one value, enumeration get header names, this method is useful when you don't know the name of the headers, exactly as we have seen earlier, and we can use it with one of the other methods. When we have the names, we can use get header using the name of the header, or get headers if we have multiple values. So here for the response we can add cookies, add header to send headers to the client. Contains header returns a boolean indicating whether the named response header has already been set. Encode URL encodes the specific URL by including the session ID on it, or if encoding is not needed, return the URL unchanged. So we use it if we have a session ID and we want to send a URL with the session ID encoded in it. Get header, get the value of the response header with the given name. Let's see here an example of HTTP servlet and answer, and go through a little bit of practice to illustrate what we are doing here. So we're gonna create a new project, and it will be a web app, and we're gonna call it demo1. So our demonstration is gonna be like that. We're gonna use Glassfish as a server. The context is the same, no frameworks for instance, and go ahead. So we're gonna add here, for example, a servlet. That here new servlet, and we call it a servlet. If you don't find it sometimes at the beginning, you will not find the servlet here. Try to browse others and look at the web, and in the web you're gonna find servlet. And next, give a name for it. We're gonna call it servlet1. Okay, and next, let's check here the source, the location, and the package. The package, we need to specify something, and the package cannot be sent to the default package, which is useless. And we go like that. We add the information to the web descriptor, web.xml. We add the name of the servlet and the URL pattern. So where something is sent to the web server with a link like that, servlet _1, which means that send this request to this servlet, which is a class or an object loaded at memory, which is an instance of that servlet _1. So we're gonna add this to the web descriptor, and here we go. We have here our servlet created. So these are just some comments here. I'm gonna clean up a little bit. Yeah, we don't need it. For the author, we may leave it. And we're gonna see here, for example, we have process request, which is called by one of these two things here. So let's see the details and we have seen doGet and doPost methods, and all of them are calling this process request, which means that whether if we receive doGet or doPost doesn't matter for us at the beginning, because it's just a code generated by NetBeans. Go for this method, which is process request. And to give more information, these two doPost or doGet are called by service, the service method. So if we receive a get method, it's gonna be sent to here and then sent to process request. So everything gonna be executed here in this part. Let's separate the code of the request from the code of the response, just to give you an idea about what is going on. We can get what? For example, if we have a string and we get from the string like the first name, we're gonna create a request with this, and we're gonna get it with what? The request dot get parameter, and we give a string parameter for it, which is a first name. Just an example. The first name is the parameter for us, and we're gonna receive this parameter, which is sent by the client using a get request. We're gonna get it and use it somehow, and send it, for example, as an answer to the client itself, and say that for example, here, that is the response, and as we said, the content type, and we get writer to write something as a text to this to the body of the answer. So we are receiving a request. We extracted the first name. Let's call it like that. We extracted the first name from this request, and now we're gonna send a response containing something. For example, an HTTP code, which is HTML and so on. Head and the body. In the body, we're gonna, your first name is, and here we're gonna get just the first name, which means that we are getting the first name and printing it here as an answer.